Welcome into the FTN NFL Draft Series. We are previewing the NFL Draft for you by going through each and every one of the 32 NFL teams. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Follow me on Twitter at RandleRand. And today, folks, I go deep into my connections. We've had fantastic guests. This guy's at the top of the list. Bo Brack on Twitter at Bo Brack, Arizona Cardinals reporter and host of the Phoenix Cardinals podcast for Phoenix Sports. I talked to Bo coming into this season. He gave us fantastic information, and today he's going to give us insight, whatever we can get here, as we have the 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl, and we're starting to look to the NFL Draft. Bo, how you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great, man. Draft season, yeah, it's officially upon us. Headed to the Senior Bowl tomorrow. Excited to see some of the top prospects there in Mobile. And really kick things off, start the combines in less than a month. Can't wait to see what those kids put on display there in Indy as well.
Yeah, a lot of information coming out, and it's great to have you here to give us some insight. Cardinals here, Bo, disappointing 4-13 season, just 1-8 at home. Last 10 months ago, they gave an extension to General Manager Steve Keim and head coach Cliff Kingsbury. Now both are not here. Keim's still on indefinite medical leave. Kingsbury has been let go. Thoughts here on the regime, on the administration, coaching staff. Kyler Murray, of course, out with the torn ACL on December 12th. He's going to miss pretty much maybe half the season, I'm hearing. Give us thoughts there on the GM, the coaching search, of course, and Kyler.
Yeah, so officially, Steve Keim, a week before Cliff Kingsbury was let go, resigned officially. So his tenure as Arizona Cardinals GM ends at just about 10 years as the general manager, but he's been in this organization for about 20 plus years. And everything that owner, president, Cardinals president Michael Bidwill knows about team building, he kind of learned from Steve Keim. And Steve Keim has been a polarizing figure for a long time, especially after the Bruce Arians era, and has struggled in the draft and building rosters with depth beyond the stars of this team. And it really showed when they faced some serious injuries, outside of the Kyler Murray injury this season, because it happened, in early December. But this roster was thin. It was proven to be too thin throughout the season. Dysfunction kind of was throughout this organization on and off the field, and the team needed a hard reset. It just needed to kind of get away from some things. Michael Bidwill fired Cliff Kingsbury and said he was going to cast a wide net. He was going to start by hiring a new general manager. He checked that box off, brought in a very, very impressive guy in Monty Ossenfort, who has ties to the New England Patriots organization, just finished a tenure there in Tennessee with the Titans. And next up on the list is checking off the box as far as who's going to be the next head coach for this team that's going to work in collaboration with Monty Ossenfort and kind of rebuilding things. And as you mentioned, Kyler Murray could be out, likely to start the season, wants this thing to heal perfectly, rehab it perfectly, get him back to where he was, thinking about through 8 weeks of 2021, where he was kind of the leader in the clubhouse for the MVP there. So, the Arizona Cardinals, things are kind of in flux here. A lot of people are hopeful for the future because for the first time ever, Bidwill's going to some external candidates to kind of turn the ship around, get some new ideas, because it's not a completely bare cupboard as far as talent on this roster. I think they can expedite a rebuild, and I think that's what people are excited about around here after a very trying 4-13 season.
Yeah, and the head coach, of course, is the key. Sean Payton in the mix. We're hearing a lot of stuff on social media. Brian Flores, Aaron Glenn, Ejiro Vero, Vance Joseph, of course, the internal candidate here. We're hearing DeMeco Ryans, who was mentioned a little bit the last couple of weeks. Looks like he's in line for Houston right now. So if you had to guess, when do you think a new coach is going to be hired, and who do you think it is right now?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, if you look at the odds, the favorite right now, Brian Flores, he worked over a decade with Monty Ossenfort in the New England Patriots organization. When Monty was introduced, he talked to the media after his introductory presser, and he was asked about Brian Flores, and he said Brian's, quote, a special coach. A lot of mutual respect there. Also, Michael Bidwill, not the last time they went through this hiring process, the previous one to that, before the Steve Wilkes hiring, they talked to Brian Flores before he became the Dolphins head coach, and he was very impressed with him, as was Adrian Wilson, who it was his positions coach when he spent a cup of coffee there in New England for a preseason one time. So 3 big-time just kind of influencers there in the Arizona Cardinals organization impressed by Flores. So I'd say he's probably, the odds-on favorite, no doubt about it. Can't even make even money in Vegas with Flores, but you can't get away from Sean Payton. I think people get kind of scared off by the sticker price. There are 5 vacancies this year, and really the only one that's still alive in this conversation after kind of chaotic week for the Broncos last week, it seems like it's the Arizona Cardinals or Fox, right? So are the Arizona Cardinals willing to pay how much it's going to cost per season, his salary demands, which, reportedly are over $20 million. Ian Rappaport walked that back a little bit, but still going to be expensive year to year for a guy like Peyton. Is Michael Bidwell willing to pay that? He told us in the Cliff Kingsbury press conference that he's willing to pay whatever it takes. The organization's history would tell you different, right? But then you've got, Sean Payton, as far as what the Saints are going to command in draft capital in return, are they going to kind of hold Peyton hostage to get the highest draft pick? I don't know if the Arizona Cardinals are willing to play that game.
Yeah, and I think the key then is going to be coming into the NFL draft this year, because how much control will Peyton want, or whoever comes in, over the personnel with the new GM? Murray is out, torn ACL. Thoughts now at starting quarterback next year for the first half of the season. I think that's the first domino to fall, because then they can get into the rest of their picks and sort of an overall plan. Last year in their draft, they ended up going 4 offense, 4 defense. First pick, of course, was second round tight end Trey McBride there. So what do you think about QB here to start the year, regardless of who the coach is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's probably good practice to start bringing in quarterbacks, especially since you're locked into Kyler Murray, through 2026. He's got the big $230.5 million contract, which, this next season, it's going to be about 7% of your salary cap. So not taking up too much. They just announced that the salary cap is going to be $224. So, we're going to look at this deal, some wiggle room to restructure and move some dollars around to where it's not going to completely handicap you cap-wise going forward. But you need to be kind of have a contingency plan, because obviously coming off a serious knee injury, is going to be the same quarterback he once was. This has become more and more routine with the ACL injuries, but I think it's good practice to maybe the Patriots did it for so long. Ossenfort is a guy coming from that organization. They drafted Jimmy G. They drafted Jacoby Brissett. Even with a guy like Tom Brady, it's smart because it's such an important position. And we're seeing that, when you have a guy under contract and it's cheap, you can build around those guys. I think that with Colt McCoy in place, he's under contract through next season. Now, not a lot of dead money tied to him. They can move off of Colt McCoy. He's there for right now. He's the placeholder in the meantime. But if it becomes a guy like Sean Payton, does it become Jameis Winston? Do you look at Taysom Hill? There are some options there just because of his past relationships and players he's worked with. Or Brian Flores, who does he like? Did he like anybody he worked with in Pittsburgh? Did he like anybody he worked with in Miami outside of Tua? Because we know that relationship is reportedly strained. There's some options there beyond, Kyler Murray and Colt McCoy. And then those quarterbacks that we're going to see in Mobile, guys we're going to see during this draft process, I think you could absolutely kind of see the Arizona Cardinals looking at one of these guys seriously, maybe come round 4 or 5 or 6.
New GM, going to be a new coach, a lot of transition right now, NFL draft coming up in a few months. So it's hard for you to speculate. We haven't set the other rounds outside of round 1. But where do you think the Cardinals, in your experience, is going to go this year with the early pick? They have a top 10 pick for the 3rd time in 5 seasons. They do have their franchise quarterback who's rehabbing. So what do you think will be the overall scheme and the focus here of the draft? Hard to say, but for that first pick and maybe an overall feel, how do you think the Cardinals are going to go here?
I mean, the Arizona Cardinals 3rd overall, they're going to have some impressive options there. And depending on what the Bears are going to do, they're odds-on favorites to trade out of that pick. They've got the quarterback situation. It feels like outside of Warren Sapp, everybody feels like Justin Fields is the guy to go, right? If they stick and pick and they take Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, I think the Arizona Cardinals will eye whoever's available there. If it's Carter, if it's Anderson, I think those are 2 great options, some big time prospects that you can move forward with. But I asked Monty Ossenfort at his introductory press conference, what's your approach to that? And he says, all options are on the table. You can obviously have there's a ton of quarterback hungry teams from Carolina to Indianapolis picking behind you. You could probably get some more draft capital and help expedite a rebuild with more capital there. get some more picks in this draft or future picks, and still probably end up with a top 10 pick. You turn towards the offensive line. You take the kid out of Northwestern. A lot of options there for Monty Ossenfort, and it's really going to kind of hinge on what happens with that first pick in the Bears, because if they stick and pick, they'll go non-quarterback, and then that just drops the Arizona Cardinals one of those impressive prospects in their lap.
And last question here, then we'll get you out of here. Of course, another big domino in the offense is DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I'm just going by what I've read. If it's Sean Payton, Hopkins may be willing to stay. Is he going to leave, depending on the new person comes in? Of course, Hopkins was out for the first part of this year, came back, really started to get that chemistry going again. Then Kyler got hurt. So what are you hearing about DeAndre Hopkins? What do you think? Because I would think that would be, Bo, a huge change. No Murray to start the year. Lose Hopkins, who's the all-pro wide receiver. That could really have a trickle-down effect for the draft. So what are you thinking with DeAndre Hopkins? Is it a wait and see to see who the coach is?
So they were supposed to meet with DeAndre Hopkins last week and talk about his future. No news has trickled out as far as what was said between Monty Ossenfort and D-Hop there. But, DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that has quite a bit of cap. He's going to be their highest cap hit in 2023. You got to see if he's willing to restructure. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room there as he's entering the final years of his deal. But entering his year 31 season, I think that a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, it could be mutually beneficial for the Cardinals to trade him and recoup some draft capital and move forward and no longer kind of have that crutch. It's nice to have that guy. He's a luxury, DeAndre Hopkins, at this point. But when you're staring down kind of a full-on reset rebuild, give him an opportunity to go win elsewhere. And I'm not saying that they're going to do that with the idea of just punting on 2023. I think that, you get the right coach in here, right play caller. We saw too often without DeAndre Hopkins that they were too reliant on him. They just weren't good the first 6 games of the season. He was suspended in 2022. They need to kind of find an offense that's going to help Kyler Murray be successful without number 10 in the lineup. But I think, I don't think it's realistic at 31 and his cap number to get a number 1 pick, a first-round pick, I should say. But you could probably get a 2 or a 3 in return for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. That would be very it would be valuable to the Arizona Cardinals as they try to, figure out which direction they want to go here in the future. Very impressive draft crop, start to rebuild the lines defensively and offensive lines there in the trenches, and 2nd or 3rd round pick definitely helps that out.
And there's just a quick follow-up, free agents here. So again, a lot of it is going to be determined as who comes in, how it moves forward. Free agents prioritizing keeping those that are going to leave. What are you hearing right now in terms of that, even with the chaos that's going on in the front office and instability in terms of trying to get it set?
It's interesting because when you have kind of a new regime, it's not their players that were selected, but there are some impressive guys that are going to be impending free agents for the Cardinals, and Byron Murphy, the cornerback, who they selected 33rd overall the year they drafted Kyler Murray, and he's been solid when he's been healthy. Really primarily a slot corner, but can play outside, and he shut down a lot of wide receiver ones before suffering a season-ending back injury this year. And then Zach Allen emerged within in the shadow of J.J. Watt, a guy who had career highs as far as passes batted down at the line and sacks and tackles for a loss. Very impressive player there. So you want to keep those guys in-house. But I think when you look at the Arizona Cardinals, it was a team that was old and too dependent on the offensive line and guys staying healthy. Got to find a guy at the center position. You got to find a guy, that interior, that offensive line has to improve. I think Justin Pugh's probably wanted to retire last offseason. So you look at the guard position. Do they bring back a guy like Will Hernandez? Do they look at some tackles too? I think McGlinchey, Orlando Brown Jr. from the Chiefs. And then on the other side of things, you got like Deron Payne. I think just the inside of those lines is where they should start to kind of look to build this team and then fill it in with some pretty impressive draft prospects after free agency.
I appreciate it, Bo. This is what we need because we're starting to get ready here, whether it's fantasy, NFL, whatever it is. We got 2 weeks to the Super Bowl, and we have to start thinking about what is going to come around the corner for the Cardinals. A lot of change here, but you're the perfect insider to have on, folks. Bo Brack, Arizona Cardinals reporter, host of the Phoenix Cardinals podcast for Phoenix Sports, on Twitter at Bo Brack. Bo, we appreciate it. Enjoy the Senior Bowl, my friend. Get some insight here, and hopefully we'll catch up with you before the draft as things get a little clearer, but we appreciate it. definitely give us a focus of what to look for here on the Cardinals as we head to the offseason.
Can't wait to talk to you before the draft, and thanks for having me.